Hi everyone, this is Zoe Salish and you are in the Data Migration Best Practices, 3 Ways to Get It Right the First Time, presented by FreshAddress and Devs United. So we're going to get started in a couple minutes here. I'm just going to give maybe just another minute for people to join. So hang tight for now. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started just because this is only a 30-minute webinar, and if people come in later, that's okay too. We are recording this and we'll be handing the recording out after. So again, thanks for joining. We have a couple presenters today. I am just starting us off, but my name is Zoe Salish. I'm the Business Development Manager at Devs United. We have Chuck Carletta. He is the Product Manager at FreshAddress. And last, we have Pato Sapir. He is the VP CRM and Marketing Automation from Devs United. All right, so Chuck, do you want to tell us a little bit about FreshAddress?
Sure, Zoe, thanks for the introduction. Hi, everyone. This is Chuck Carletta. As Zoe said, I'm the product manager for FreshAddress. So what are we? We're an email database services company founded over 20 years ago. So we've been around the block for a while. And what do? So we help companies and nonprofits clean, protect, grow their email lists. We've worked with over 2,500 clients, including 25% of the Fortune 100. And as of a couple weeks ago, we've actually processed over 14 billion email addresses. So we've been around, we know what we're doing, and I'm excited to talk about email hygiene and how that works into the whole data migration aspect of everything.
All right, thanks, Chuck. And then a little bit about who Devs United is. So we are a Gold Salesforce consulting partner, and we really specialize in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So we have over 25 marketing automation experts, and we are located, our headquarters are in Cleveland, and then we have offices in Argentina and Chile as well. So we have implemented over 80 marketing automation implementations, and of those, we have a 5 out of 5 customer satisfaction rating, which we are very happy to boast. In the beginning of last year, in January of 2019, Devs United got acquired by Marcus Thomas, so we are now part of a full-service advertising agency. All right, so before we get started, I just want to go over the agenda. And before I even start this, I just want everyone to know, again, we are recording this, so you'll get the recording at the end. And then also, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat on the GoToWebinar. So, all right, so today we're going to be going through data migration best practices, email hygiene, impact, and your migration success. And then we'll have we're hoping to have about 5 minutes for Q&A at the end. So again, feel free to put those questions in the chat. All right, and with that, Pato, do you want to start us off?
Yep, thank you so much, Zoe, and thank you everyone for attending today. So we wanted to kick off by talking about really 3 steps that you will take when you start the process of migrating to a new email marketing tool. So let's talk about the first step, which is ensuring the structure of your data. Really the first step of a migration process is thinking about how your data, what is the data that you have today at hand, and how it relates with each other. So if you want to go to the next slide, sorry, as you plan to migrate to a new email marketing platform, the first thing that you will want to do is you really start mapping the different data sources that that you have and how they relate with each other and how they actually add information and give you information about your customer. So, typically in an organization, you have different silos of data. You have e-commerce data, you have email data, website, and CRM. Migrating to a new email marketing platform is really a good opportunity to start thinking about what is my source of truth. How will the data flow from the different systems? Do I have to integrate with all the different systems? Who is the database of record for email preferences? Is my data correctly organized? Do I have some sort of denormalized data that I can take the opportunity? So migrating to a new email marketing platform is really a great opportunity to realize if we are having issues with identifying our single source of truth, but also it's a really good opportunity to map the architecture of how my data is going to live in this email marketing platform. The second step, if you go to the next slide, is once you have your solution design outline, the second step is you need to start onboarding subscribers into your new platform, right? You start importing data into your new platform and you want to start sending emails, right? So this is a very important step. If you go to the next slide, please. As you onboard new subscribers into your new email platform, it is very important to consider, what is your active subscriber count and what is your sending volume. These are two factors that you really, really need to know. If you are today in an email marketing tool that you don't have these metrics, I will be worried because it's very important to know what are your active subscriber counts, what is your sending volume, but also it's very important to understand your engagement numbers, open rates, click rates, bounce rates, etc. Email providers such as Google and Microsoft have specific algorithms and systems in place to avoid companies from emailing people who are not opted in to receive email communications if they haven't authorized them. So when you're migrating to a new email platform, you are probably going to start sending using a fresh new IP address, which means that you need to build your reputation against these email service providers. And you need to do it from the ground up. As you can see in the chart from the left, as your reputation grows, your send volume has to be growing. So to do this, the process is really building an IP warm-up plan based on the volume you want to achieve, breaking down this email sends by email domain. And then as days go by, you increase your volume day by day and watch your deliverability stats. Once you reach a desired volume you want to keep, then you keep that cadence to maintain your reputation. This is why it's very important to know the metrics, open rates, click rate, to know the metrics about engagement, because you want to start sending to your most engaged subscribers. So this is a second step as you're migrating to a new email platform. That's very critical. Onboarding new subscriber into a new platform, you need to understand your deliverability rates, and you need to do it slowly. And the last step, if you go to it, thank you. The last step is to ensure that as you are sending and continue to migrate data, the data that you have is has integrity, right? So, and if you go to the next slide, what I mean by that is data hygiene, right? So as you import and onboard new subscribers, maybe as they are registering, signing up for emails, creating an account, or even if you do a bulk import for the first time, you really need to ask this question: do I have duplicates? Do I have unique key identifier to each of these records? Can I uniquely identify a record from another one? Really important also for email marketing tools, is my email data clean, and is it safe to migrate? Is it safe to send to this new or imported subscriber? So with that, I think Chuck is going to talk a little more on this topic.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pato. All right, so data migration, as Pato was going through, it can be complicated, and you got to make sure you do it correctly. But obviously, a very important aspect of a data migration process is to make sure that the data you actually have is clean, it's hygienic. And it's not as easy as it seems. I mean, I think something we've learned with this COVID-19 times is, it's important to wear a mask, but how you wear it, where you wear it, is important. It's the same thing with hygiene for email. It's not enough that you're doing it. You got to make sure that you're doing it correctly. And that's for a variety of reasons. Practicing good list hygiene is not just removing emails that are undeliverable, but it's also focusing on the ones that are deliverable but toxic. And just more of a statistic, last year, bouncing emails rose 37% from Q1 2019 to Q1 2020. So that increase in bouncing emails, that's popping up. So making sure that what email addresses you have in your database are cleaned and continuously cleaned is increasingly important. So if we look at our next slide, there are many bad email addresses, and it's kind of speaking to what I was saying before, where we're not just focusing on what you can send to and removing the ones that are undeliverable, but it's the deliverable but toxic, the deliverable but dangerous email addresses that could really do you harm for both your account and your sender reputation. Now, before I go too deep into that, let's talk a little bit more about the kind of costs of poor email database hygiene. So if we go to the next slide. So poor email database hygiene. So email addresses that are undeliverable are worthless. I think that kind of goes without saying, but if you're not getting the bang for your buck, if you're not having the actual email address you can send to, it doesn't really mean much. You can't make any money off of it, and it's a waste for even having it. But I think the thing people overlook quite a bit is having bad email addresses hurts your bottom line. And the ones that you can send to can do that in increasingly dangerous amounts. So something as simple as a typo, bogus, disposable role accounts, or as dangerous as spam trap can be quite detrimental to your campaign. And I think a lot of people don't think about is how good addresses can go bad. So just because you practice good hygiene, during a data migration, right? You go through the whole effort of making sure that your list is clean and is safe to send. But if you don't keep on it and you don't keep tracking the actual email address and whether it's good or bad, it eventually does go bad. In fact, up to 6% of good email addresses turn toxic each year. And just one of these could sink your entire program. So it's really important to stay vigilant and constantly scanning your list and being alert for when deliverability threats come up. So let's go on to our next slide. And so I think I've talked a decent amount about this, but for bad email addresses, what's the cost associated with them? Well, they'll mess up your campaign metrics. They're going to make it hard for you to get an accurate view of what's really going on with your campaigns. It's going to make it harder for you to reach the inbox. It's going to waste your money, and it's going to potentially get you in trouble with your customers if they're getting something they shouldn't be getting, or they're not getting anything at all when they really wanted it. And honestly, most importantly, if you send to the wrong one, you run the risk of blocking or being blacklisted, and your entire email program is going to come to a halt. So without practicing good hygiene, a lot of these bad things could happen to your campaign or to your account. So before I get into a specific example of something that we do at FreshAddress, email hygiene impact on migration, studies have shown that about 12%, 13% of email addresses entered on a sign-up form are initially invalid due to misspelling or attempting to use a fake address. So, you're at a cash register, someone asks you if you want to be part of the program, you say yes, maybe you get a discount, you want to make sure you can get a lower price when you're there. Whether it's you or it's them, they could fat finger your email address, and now it's a bad email, and you either not going to get something, or honestly, the worst scenario that does happen is you could misspell a perfectly valid email address, and the misspelling is actually a spam trap. So sometimes something as simple as that can throw up your entire campaign. And when you compound that over time, a database decay can cause deliverability and email ROI to take a hit if you're sending to or through a new ESP as part of that data migration. So something that we can do to help this is one of our products called SafeToSend. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm just going to show you 2 slides, just an example of what our product is. And if you would like a more detailed report or more detailed example, please feel free to email me and I can send you something. But I really just want to give a brief overview of what we're talking about and what this means. So SafeToSend. If you upload a file, you work with us, you upload a file. So in this example, it's around 10 million. We're going to go through and give you a complete breakdown of what the composition of your file is. So something that is valid, safe to send, so our product, it means it passed 100% of our process. Email addresses should be safe to send to. We give you our guarantee on that. Now, something that's valid, it passes the majority of our process, but there's a couple things we can't confirm. We still say that it's valid, but we're not going to give it that 100% guarantee. So this is just running through that data and saying, what's valid. And in this particular list, a good chunk of the file, 97%, is valid, and that's great. But the real problem that really comes up is, if we go to the next slide, the warnings. So again, 97% of that file is good to go, which is great, right? But in this file, there's 10,000 confirmed spam traps, approximately. 124 invalid email accounts, around 20,000 that were disposable, 16,000 that had a bad domain, 9,000 that were on a do not email list. So while it's a small percentage of a 10 million file is still quite large. And any one of those 10,000 spam traps could shut down your account right away. So this is one of those things where we're giving you a complete breakdown, and this is just a couple of the categories we're looking at, a complete breakdown of your file so that you can make decisions off of that. So as you can see, as part of this, you see those little codes. We have B, XP, MR, whatever it may be. Yeah, so this is a summary file just to show you, what's the composition, how is my file doing, how could my campaign do? But when you actually look at the results file you uploaded, which hopefully, as Pato was talking about earlier, has a primary key and is uniquely identified, part of the thing it's doing is it's marking each of those individual emails with this code. So not only do you have an overview of, where does my email campaign stand, but you can go through those individual emails and do some initial data analysis yourself. How did this particular grouping of emails do? Maybe the particular channels that they came from, and you can further clarify it with your marketing team from there to shut it down or introduce a new method to help clean it up. And so this is just the warnings that it shows. One thing that we're very good at, and I'll speak to a little bit later, is we're also good at catching anything. They mistyped the domain, they forgot the @ sign, there's a double period, a double.com. We've seen pretty much everything, and we have a category to showcase it. And if we can't correct it, we're at least showing you where it is and what you can do to fix it. All right. So that's just a breakdown of some parts of the report. And Zoe, if you just click this just to make them appear, because I can speak to them. All right. So as part of our safe to send process, we check, correct, and we protect. And a lot of this is going to be pretty self-explanatory, so I'll give just a high-level overview. But then, as our coming slides go, I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail on what each of these steps do. So from a base perspective, we're going to check, we're going to verify that each address in real time is real and confirm that it's valid and can accept mail, right? The next step, and I think a lot of people are familiar with this, is just doing a spell check. We have our own technology behind this. We're very good at seeing these. Like I said before, been around for about 20 years. So we're checking a lot of different errors that could occur in your file and working to fix those so that when you look at it, you have either a clean file or we've partitioned off the bad ones so you know not to include them. And then finally, protect. So I think this is one of those areas that we excel at and is exceptionally important to identify, is making sure that those spam traps and other damaging email addresses that are deliverable are categorized. And that's where it could really destroy your campaign if you're not up to snuff with that. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll go into a little bit more detail what each of these steps actually, they do. So one, we're going to determine, is the email address valid and accepting? So there's a couple ways you can do this. One, we're going through our different syntax checks. So, RFCs are just different internet accepted standards that are for email addresses. So we're checking to make sure that those are upheld. We have our own standards as a company, just because we've been around for a while. We're doing, general domain checks. So that means, checking the real-time MX record, making sure that domain server actually accepts emails, but checking the top level and lower level domains, is it actually .com or not .cmo or something that wouldn't actually be allowed. And then each of these ISPs have their own specific rules for emails themselves. So like Gmail, they don't allow underscores in the handle. That's something we checked for. Other ISPs have their own rules, and that's something we're also going to be looking at. But that's just a specific example that what we're watching. Then there's account level validation. So we have real-time SMTP check, but also we have a vast partnership with different ESPs. So we're going to be checking recent email deliverability findings with those internal and external partners to double check if those are valid emails. All right, so just a couple of examples to go through, which will be on the next slide. All right, so a couple of these are keystroke errors. For the first one, they forgot an @ sign. The second one, they put a comma instead of a dot for the .net. The next one after that, they put 2 dots. You could run through all of these and see just basic mistakes. Either someone fat fingered it, or the email addresses were required some other way and they weren't formatted correctly. This happens all the time, whether it's from the person working the station, or it's a failed data migration where, no, I shouldn't say failed, but a data migration where it's not removing and cleaning the data as it should. So it's going to have syntax errors. So this is something we're checking for. So if we go for the next slide to talk about correct. So this is where we're going to go through kind of the different things we're really good at. So we're going to be looking for missing or duplicated @ signs and periods, anything that has accidental spaces, quotes, other incorrect characters that aren't normally associated with an email address, duplicate, missing, or transposed characters, misspellings, even misheard email domains. We have a kind of our own little collection of mistypings, like putting like google.com instead of gmail.com. It happens all the time, and that's something we're used to seeing and we can catch. And then something as simple as misunderstanding, one versus I, right? That happens all the time. So going to the next slide, just to look at a couple of examples. We see a couple of these formatting errors where, IBM.com, where they actually spell out the dot, Zappos having 1 P instead of 2. Just a couple of examples to look at for, what we're looking for and the fact that we can correct it and making sure that your data is ready to go if you're migrating platforms. All right, so for our final one, protect. So this is something we're exceptionally good at identifying. So this is the deliverable but dangerous, deliverable but toxic, undesirable, suspect, not best practice. These emails are the ones that could sink your campaign. So something as simple as one spam trap that maybe was mistyped from a valid email address, which happens. Something undesirable. So I know a popular thing, if a company comes out with a new program where if you sign up, you get, let's say a month free. We've seen those signups before. People will use disposable domains, disposable email addresses, and sign up for them. And while that's great for them, it really means nothing for you in terms of a real email address, a real customer behind it. So that's something that we're good at identifying and weeding out. And, just kind of, I don't want to go through too many of these, but, from a role account perspective, we allow for certain people to use role accounts if they want them. Generally, that's not best practice, but, we have the technology to allow you to, make that an exception if you want role accounts or not. All right, so going to the next slide, just a couple of examples. I think we all know what role accounts are, but something like info @ or admin @ is an example of what you could see. Any fictitious emails where, at Microsoft or Bill Gates at Microsoft.com. Just a couple of quick examples. I won't go too much time into this, but we can catch these and we're going to notify you of them so that you don't continue to send to them, because that could block or blacklist your campaign. All right, so let's go to the next slide. All right, so we've talked a decent amount about data hygiene. So obviously it's important to clean your file. It's really important to scan all your emails in real time. Like one of the things we offer, we have an API for real-time integration. So if someone is, fat fingering their email when they sign up for something at a store, that program, that API is going to catch that and say, hey, did you actually mean, at gmail.com instead of whatever you wrote? And finally, a third step to this solving these problems permanently issue is make sure you scan your file throughout the year. I talked about how 6% of your email addresses, which could be good, turn toxic every year. So it's not just a one-time thing, it's a year-round aspect that you have to make sure you do. And finally, I think the last slide that I have to talk through, and I won't spend too much time because I want to get to a Q&A if there are any questions. Email hygiene ROI. So email hygiene is great for your data migration. It's something you should absolutely do, but it's something you should do because it's going to help you make more money. You want to make sure that you're getting the corrections you're actually sending to customer email addresses that want to work with you. We're detecting those spam traps to make sure you avoid getting blacklisted. We want to make sure your inbox placement is up, so your clicks and your revenues are good. And at the end of the day, this all leads to higher customer satisfaction, lower call center costs, and you're going to stop wasting money sending to dangerous email addresses that honestly aren't going to do anything for you. They're only going to hurt you. And I'll pause it there because I want to make sure we have time to talk through any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Chuck. So we do have a couple of questions that came in. It looks like the first one is for you, Chuck.
Sure.
How do you ensure that the addresses you validate continue to be valid throughout time?
Absolutely. No, so that's a really good question. So, I talked about SafeToSend. If you upload an email list, we'll check it. We'll give you the results for it. But, that's a one-time thing at first. And one of the things you should do from a good data hygiene practice is to make sure it's continuously clean. So something that we do, we have something called List Guard where, it's 24/7 monitoring of your list to make sure that, all right, I ran it once, it was good, that's great. But we're going to keep checking it. We're going to keep running it to make sure that those good email addresses don't turn bad, which sometimes happens.
All right, thank you. And one last question we have is, I think it's for you, Pato. Do you always have to do an IP warm-up when you migrate into a new email platform?
No, it really depends on the volume of active subscribers that you have and what's your sending strategy. I usually look into that when deciding if an IP warm-up strategy is needed. Some email marketing tools also put you on what is called a shared IP address. I typically don't recommend doing that, if your send volume is big, because you are grandfathered in there with the reputation of other senders. So you share the sender reputation with other companies. So if you have to do an IP warm-up, I typically recommend trying to get a dedicated IP address. There are email marketing tools that by default, they give you a dedicated IP address, others and don't. But you don't always need to do that.
Okay, great. It looks like we don't have any other questions, just some comments that this was helpful, so I'm glad to hear that. Again, we recorded this, so we're going to send out the recording shortly. And then one last thing is that this was actually the first part of a two-part series. So our next webinar is going to be on August 13th. Same with Devs United and FreshAddress. And this one's going to focus on best practices when migrating to Salesforce Marketing Cloud and how FreshAddress can help. So if that's something that interests you, we will go ahead and send you a link of how to register for that. But it's going to be on August 13th, so stay tuned. So thank you all for your time, and hopefully we look forward to seeing you at that next webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you.